Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank a lot for the invitation to be here, to Mark, Matilda, and all the organizing team. This has been amazing. I'm here since the previous conference, and it has been really, really good. So I'm Bárbara Horta Costa. I'm Portuguese. I work at CCMAR at the University of Algarve, so southern Portugal. And I'm here today to speak a little bit about some conditions of MPA success. And I was asked to speak about a local context that is going on nearby. But I wanted also to give some global context because I think it's very important that we tackle both at the same time. Okay. So just to start, I'm coming from further south in Europe, and it's the first time in the Arctic, so really further north. And I was surprised how easy it was to arrive here, despite some issues with the flights, but it was only 2 flights to come here, so usually it's very hard to go out from Faro. So we are. It was like an impression that we are really connected, and to go almost 5,000 kilometers very, very fast. It was really revealing this globalization that we are facing for decades now. So it's so easy to travel and to be connected, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you. But this also comes with some costs, of course. So there are impacts of this at all levels, and I think that is why we are here, because we are worried with the impacts, and we are worried. We want to work with conservation. And actually, this reveals also the need of increasing conservation measures. So I asked myself why I study MPAs. And the first answers I got to me was that they are focused on ecosystem focus, so they have this component of nature and grandeur, so it's area-based, so can include a lot of things. They also include iconic species, so large organisms, large schools, as we saw yesterday in this beautiful movie. They can also relate with special places, so not only the pristine ones, but also the impacted ones that we are willing to restore and to see them thrive. So all these aspects, they have a lot of emotion inside of them. So even if I want to say that I'm studying this because of rational purposes, actually, the emotion is the motivation for most of us to do what we do, right? And so if we study MPAs because we want to be connected to something powerful and bigger than we can imagine, we need to also realize that people that use these areas are also connected with them because of this, because they want to feel this connection. And we saw the good example yesterday in the movie of this importance. So why do we need MPAs? We all know ocean systems are on the edge. MPAs can be one of the best solutions, but they need some conditions to succeed. So not all MPAs should count. So we are aware of scientific evidence that shows importance of sound design, so size, age, important features of the areas, the features of species that are there. Also the importance of effective implementation, management, regulation, monitoring, enforcement. So we are aware of all of these conditions now. We are increasingly aware of the importance of inclusion and the acceptance for MPAs to succeed. But we must recognize that most of these studies and all the initiatives around MPAs and all these targets, they come from few studies mostly focused on fully protected areas, so a small part of MPAs in the world. And mostly in coastal waters. So we need to know much more. We need more knowledge. So most MPAs, unfortunately, remain poorly implemented, weakly regulated. They are mostly established through a top-down approach, especially in this Western world or Northern Hemisphere. Because of that, they are likely ineffective in meeting socio-ecological goals that they have. And this is very important because they might be deceiving the public and missing the real in situ relevance, despite all the commitments and willingness to use MPAs in a good way. And so, since we are speaking about marine spatial planning, some of these topics might be the reason why they are undervalued and under these spatial planning mechanisms, and the opposite can be also true. So this slide is seen in every conference now, so a lot of presentations show them. But I think it's relevant to remind that this is only applicable if we consider that MPAs are really implemented and all these features that I just said and the enabling conditions are met. So only in that situation we can look at this and see that different levels of protection will lead to different expected outcomes. And of course that we are aiming the ones that are represented there in the fully and highly protection. So the past years I've been involved with a lot of people, really interesting network, and one of the initiatives were to understand the conditions, how MPAs are at the global scale. And Elizabeth Pike from MPA Atlas led this interesting study assessing the 100 largest MPAs in the world, and we found, so we assessed levels of protection and stages of establishment following the MPA guide framework, and we found that only 1/3 have levels of protection that can yield some conservation benefits, and one quarter was only designated, were not even implemented. So they are only paper parks, and these are the ones, the largest MPAs, the ones that countries are showing off. So they are trying to meet these targets fast. So they are implementing these MPAs that we also saw yesterday. They are very important. So yesterday we saw one example in the ocean movie that is working, but apparently most of them are not. Also, 1/3 allow highly impactful activities, so industrial activities that are not consistent or coherent or compatible with conservation objectives. And we also found that fully and highly, so the ones that can deliver conservation outcomes, they are mostly in isolated overseas territories, and that questions how this, if this is equitable, and how the metropolitan areas with a huge amount of users are being left without this type of protection. So at the European scale, a PhD student that we have, Juliette, did these huge efforts of trying to compile all the information about regulations on EU MPAs. It was really hard to get them because some information is in Marine Spatial Planning, so there are some connections, as they are actually related, but they are completely dispersed. So the information of each MPA is not concentrated in one person or in one document. So even management plans are very, very incomplete when they exist. So actually we needed a lot the Marine Spatial Planning information, but they are also very insufficient. They don't have, for example, fishing information or detailed fishing information. So it was really hard to get this information. And after the 3 years trying to compile all the information, which was really weird because we don't know people that work in the MPAs, they don't know what's happening there. we found that with around 11% of EU coverage, more than 80% had low protection, meaning lightly, minimally, or even incompatible with conservation. And only 1.5 showed of the area, of the MPA area, showed strong protection. This means that to meet in 5 years the 10% of strictly protected areas, we would need to increase more than 50 times, especially if the definition of the European Commission means that strictly protected areas should be fully protected areas. It's not completely clear, but if that is the case, then we would need to increase much more than 50%, than 50 times. Okay. So another PhD student I have was trying to assess the risk of the MPAs, of existing MPAs to climate change. So we picked up the existing MPAs, the species that are with them. We selected the commercial species and the IUCN listed species because we thought these were the ones that should be the main target of conservation measures. And we measured the climate dissimilarity that the species will face in the future. So we found that more than 80% of all species will be at risk, the ones that are inside MPAs. So we need actually to adapt MPAs to future species, or to follow these species somehow, or to adapt people to the new species that are coming. Because if we in the high emission scenario, we'll face a very bad situation, and especially you see the red polygons in the Baltic. So in a recent project that is called Horizon project, that is called MARHAB, and that is led by IMR at Floddervigen, and the coordinator is Evan Molland there, taking a picture to this slide. We decided to expand the EU assessment to Norway. We are also fine-tuning Denmark and Sweden to have more detailed information on fisheries, because it's the most difficult information to get. We found, since we are in Norway, I found this important slide to show. So Norway has around 4.5% of its EEZ with MPAs, and 96% of the MPA with low protection, which is an amazing result. And you can see that the largest, or the area that is more protected with more MPAs are in Svalbard. So also, again, remote areas with less users. We also focused, this project focused in an important region of Skagerrak and Kattegat. So we for a policy brief that was delivered last year to the Nordic Council of Ministers, we did this brief assessment of this area. We found a much higher percentage of MPAs, but actually most of the MPAs were incompatible with conservation. So they allow so many destructive activities that they should not be considered MPAs probably. And recently we published, like in April, this assessment. So we are doing X-rays to MPA, or diagnosis on how they likely perform, but then we wanted to translate this into expected conservation benefits. And so we did a meta-analysis using stages of establishment and levels of protection. And we found interesting results because, I don't know if the pointer is working. Yes. So for fish density, we can see that there are some positive, significant positive responses even in the implemented MPAs. So dark green is significant positive, red significant negative, and none. But for fish biomass, even in the implemented MPAs, we didn't find any significant results, even for fully protected areas. So this was a bit surprising. So the difference between implemented and actively managed is enforcement, the involvement of people, so engagement with local communities. And another interesting result here is that, for example, lightly protected areas, if they are implemented, they can even have negative effects, so lower density inside than outside, whereas if they are actively managed, they can have even more biomass inside than outside. So the importance of the stage of establishment is really huge. And of course, for the minimally protected, a lot of things can occur. The difference between this and incomparable is because there are some requirements in the IUCN that says that some activities are incompatible, but in the minimally protected, we also have already high impact activities occurring. So they are attracting users, so they are performing less good than outside. So it's better to be outside of the MPA for the fish. And even if we are placing MPAs in better places, which sometimes occurs, they are getting worse because of the amount of activities that are occurring inside. So with a lot of researchers, we have been trying to publish and trying to find recommendations for decision makers to not to count all MPAs as MPAs. Actually, in the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, for Target 3, there is only one mandatory indicator, which is area coverage. And we are always asking them to add something related to quality, not only quantity. For our studies, we think that levels of protection and stages could be some kind of metric that could try to fine-tune a little bit of quality, but there might be other metrics that could be used, but the only indicator so far is area coverage, so it doesn't encourage to establish good MPAs. So, zooming a bit more, this is an old map of Portuguese MPAs, so we've heard that last year and other MPAs were established in the Azorian waters. But just to show the size of our EEZs, so the blue is our EEZ, the light blue is the extended continental shelf. We are the third largest EEZ in Europe and in the EU. And if we count only in the EU territory, we are the largest EEZ. So France and Denmark they have largest EEZs, but they include overseas territories. So we have large MPAs. Some of these are proposals, some already established, but most are nearshore MPAs that were established through traditional processes because nearshore were the most impacted area, and also they have this connection between the terrestrial and protected areas and marine ones. But one important thing is that the vast majority of our MPAs are established through top-down approach, and they have very, very weak surveillance, so they have very low effectiveness. I hope the new ones will be different. And so we question why we need MPAs, why are we establishing them? So this is important to think about. It's a huge effort. This is also a more or less old already matrix of the levels of protection and stages for Portuguese MPAs. And you can see that the vast majority are minimally protected and only designated, so they are not working in the water. These kind of X-rays are really important to raise awareness to decision makers, so they know that they cannot expect anything or very little from these MPAs. I must say that this is also because we have these very large MPAs offshore. In the extended continental shelf, we don't have jurisdiction over the water column. So I really liked the proposal that Rashid said yesterday of the buffer around the AZ, because then we would have these extended continental shelves with protected areas. It would be very, very nice. And also because in the EEZs, in the European Union, we have the common fisheries policy, so we don't own or we don't manage alone our resources in the water column. And this is very important to solve very fast, otherwise we won't get the 10% of strictly protected areas, because we need the AEZ to get to these values. And so far, this Article 11 in this Common Fisheries Policy has been very, very hard to operationalize and to get these joint recommendations approved. So just another warning. So we should go up. We now are in a different position because we now have more fully protected areas due to the Azores, but they still need to be well implemented and actively managed. And then I will zoom to the last part of my talk, so the one that I was asked to bring here, the local thing that is happening there. So just showing some images of this area. This is in the Algarve, so southern Portugal. Very complex rocky reef, very rich, high biodiversity. And the visibility is not so bad, depending on the days, of course. Okay, so this is an MPA, now it's already a marine park, that benefited a lot from the Marine Spatial Planning processes, because my team, I was not yet there at that time, but my team was asked to understand where would be the best areas to do sand extraction. So we got some funding to study until the 30 meters deep. And doing that, doing this assessment for sand, we found this huge rocky reef right in the middle of the Algarve, so the most touristic place in Portugal. And doing the habitat mapping, so we have this EONIS classification. We also have some dots where important species for conservation were found. So this was a really important process that were not possible if spatial planning was not occurring in Portugal at that time. So we found 45 news records for Portugal, and the most amazing thing was that we found 12 new species for science worldwide. So we don't have that much funding for science, but at least to understand where sand would be important to feed the beaches for tourism, we had the opportunity to do this. And then overlapping this information, we have these hotspots of biodiversity. So more or less here and here. So we overlap density, presence of important species, biomass, and so on. We also had projects to understand and to map fisheries there. So this was a combination of luck or different opportunities to understand this area. So we have all this information, they are not available in many MPAs. So we were lucky. But you can see that we did some surveys and we found that the most important area for artisanal fisheries were actually in this area, which is not so surprising because it's a huge rocky reef full of species and biodiversity. And also for the purse seining, an important fisheries over there because we love sardines and mackerels. we found that in the, this is 30 meters deep, so when the reef is ending, and some hotspots were surrounding this rocky reef, because it's also a very productive area with phytoplankton and pelagic species. So one fisher association that was centered in this area was receiving all this information, and they were thinking that they should be protected from other fishers. So they wanted to, they were the promoters or the instigators of this movement. But then the local administration was jumping in, and then us, and then Ocean Azul Foundation as well. So the idea was to create a different MPA that was bottom-up led. So the first step was to map all the relevant stakeholders. Everyone should be included, so a lot of calls and contacts and some meetings to gather interest in this proposal. And one of the first achievements of this was also related to spatial planning processes. So the spatial planning maps were being developed at that time, and we immediately asked to add the polygon of the future MPA even before the MPA was the process was even started. So this was the polygon that were added there at that time. And another big achievement for fishers and tourism in the region was that in the spatial planning, there was this huge polygon for offshore aquaculture just over the rocky reef, this really rich rocky reef. So several letters for decision makers, a lot of people were arguing that this should not occur. So this was really an important achievement to buy in the stakeholder engagement in the process, because they were really happy that we could avoid this. This other one is a polygon for sand extraction that is now reduced, but is still, if it's really needed for tourism purposes or safety in the beaches, they can extract from this area. So during the process, we also did some socioeconomic studies. So this is the most used area in our country. So we were aiming to establish an MPA in the most important area for tourism and other activities. And we found that commercial fisheries were responsible for 8 million euros per year. Around 200 vessels were using this relatively small area, and landings had decreased 70% in the last 20 years. Also, recreational fisheries is a very important activity there. But the most striking result was that the marine tourism increased 40 times in 10 years, 1 million people per year, so 21% of all tourism in the Algarve goes there. And this represents 40 million euros per year of direct revenues. I'm not sure if that is a lot for other countries, but for us it is. Another important step was to gather all the stakeholders and try to understand what were actually the preferred areas that they used in this area. And so we asked commercial fishing, marine tourism, and then we overlapped the uses. And then, since you can see here that there was an area that was not so preferred, and this would also match with these hotspots, the first proposal we developed was actually this one, very compact over these hotspots. But stakeholders didn't like it, so it was good for us to get detached of our proposals as well. So we were a stakeholder at the same time that we were doing this technical work. So they wanted to link both hotspots, which was also an interesting proposal. And then this evolves, of course, with a lot of negotiations. And this is now the last map of this area. We have the largest no-take area in mainland Portugal, at least the continuous area, local fishers could have this inner part only for them, so small-scale vessels, and then the general fisheries is outside. No one was excluded, but only ones that used the area were allowed to have a license. And it was important, even including purseaners, this was really important to engage them in the process and avoid them to block the process. And also they will have the real-time tracking is required. So to speed up, in numbers we had several sessions, but this is the important one. We had a huge amount of bilateral meetings to try to accommodate all the interests if they not compromise the solution. So this was really a negotiation process. And we started with co-constructing a vision for the area in 15 years. How do you envision this area to be? And this was a really interesting icebreaker as well to meet all of us. And then we could get a zoning proposal and regulation principles that people wrote that they would agree on. So major lessons is that we cannot aim for consensus in this type of processes because there are so many different interests involved. We need to do a lot of negotiations and have trade-offs, and diplomacy was also very, very important. We had to engage other municipalities, and then they brought other stakeholders, so it was a really important process. Then the follow-up actions. This is already classified, designated. Financial compensations were required and suggested in the participatory process. So now we will never be able to establish an MPA without paying for it. But at the same time, fishers were much more pleased, and we think it was a fair process. It was one-time compensation for adaptation. The management plan is being written by us because the management authority, they are not prepared to accommodate in their legal requirements the outcomes of a participatory process. So we are trying to accommodate this in the management plan. Financing and surveillance, as discussed yesterday, we are trying to do some submitting calls to have some funding. The co-management is not completely legally possible in Portugal, but we are trying this. We try to change the law, but it's still not enough, but we will try some informal ways of doing this. And we were lucky to have some funding to do this socio-ecological monitoring before the MPA. So we were in all these zones already to do some monitoring. So we are trying to follow the good standards for MPA success. And then the last slide. So the key lessons from the follow-up is that we are not prepared for different ways of establishing MPAs. So participatory approaches imply that then we need to accept what is decided by the group. We think that this has become the role model of MPA in Portugal, so we are happy for that. So in the Azorian MPAs, they're also following participatory approaches. There are other MPAs that are being planned with these processes. And just to say that it's a very lengthy process, but we already lost so much time implementing MPAs that do not work, that I think it's really worth to do this type of processes. But of course, if we want to meet 10% in 5 years, we need to start now, because this takes time to engage and involve. And I think that's it, because I'm on time, and I was just wanting to send the message that it's very important to be global, but also locally focused, because actually the change is in political, maybe in a global scale, but in changing things, it's actually occurring at the local scale. So thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I apologise for rushing you. It's only so long. I can pass the floor to the audience now to ask you some questions.
Sure.
We have some 5 minutes just over for some questions, so I open the floor to you. Who would like to first? We've got one on the right here. Where about applicants? The one on the right hand side was the lady here holding her hand up.
Thank you very much for a very nice talk, very interesting. I'm working with management plans in the Netherlands, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about how you define the hotspots.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to ask me about the management plan. So the hotspots, we overlapped different layers of information. So it was abundant density of commercial species, diversity, the presence of species with commercial interest, and I guess was it, and some other information. So we overlap. We actually did a Markson exercise. The areas were relatively similar, but it was not so clear to show. So we opted to go to this direction and overlap the information. And when they had all these, so we divided the layers in 1 to 5, and when they had the maximum values and overlapped, you had the hotspots.
Thank you, Barbara. That was a nice presentation. My name is Kelly. I'm working in National Park, and I'm looking to collaborating with Alf and evaluating our park, which is now implemented 7.9 on your scale. And I have a question. Do you have any plan for the fishermen who has to give up some of their fishing grounds? Do they have like a reschooling program? Are they turned into tourist industry? What do you do to get them involved with other occupations other than fishing?
Okay, good question. So, fishers, some of them, they work in tourism as well, and in summer, because this is really, really a touristic place. But we didn't show any ways to go. We just said that if they want to keep working there in the future, they would need to stop fishing in some of the areas. But the thing is that the local fishers, so the ones that are below 9 meters length, they have the exclusivity of the inner part of the reef. So that was an achievement for them, because they cannot go very far. They have small vessels. And some of these vessels, they go out from the beach. They don't even have a harbor. So they were really limited to this area, but they were suffering high competition from other vessels from other parts of the Algarve. So that was the main goal of them, was to exclude the other vessels. Of course, that the larger vessels didn't get very pleased with this. And how we dealt with this was to give this compensation. So the compensation, the financial compensation, was based on landings and distance to the harbor, and also the size of the vessel. So some of the large vessels got some good financial compensation. It was 1 year only. But the truth is that they were not using that much the reef, because they have these large nets. So they can, the area that is now that will be no take is not the preferred area for these large vessels. So they got some money, even if they don't use the area so much. So it was also a good commitment. Of course, there were some opposition, and there were some protests, and even in the ocean with the vessels. But for the local associations, they are really happy, and they are asking us, when does the management plan get implemented? Because we want this to be completed. It was an effort of everyone, and now we want this to be completed, because the designation was already done, but it only has this no take, no go. All the other areas are not yet implemented, so we need the management plan.